There's Barbie.
There's Barbie. Yeah, I finally watched it.
You got anything to say about it?
I hesitate to because I'm very late to the party here. You've already talked about it. I guess between trying to watch a few extra things for the Oscars and having caught up on the Marvels, I was just like, well, maybe now's the time to just watch this thing. Now, I watched it right after I saw the Marvels.
So it's probably like, a little oasis in the desert, basically.
Yeah, it compared well. The first things that I noticed was like, oh, this has creative direction. When analyzing a screenplay, I think that there are three major components to what go into a good screenplay. One is the structure, which is like, how are we actually going to structure the plot elements and the story across time? Like, so how will we pace this thing? What will the major beats be? And how many of them will there be, and will they make any sense? I thought that Barbie had a really pretty good story structure. They set up a status quo in Barbie land, and then she has an inciting incident. She goes to the real world. She encounters, some new plot elements. She returns to Barbie land where all hope is lost. And then through, some falling action, she's able to resolve it. Like, generally, it followed the 3-act structure, and it did it pretty well. It more or less, it followed those beats intelligently. Then I think the second component are the themes. Like, what's this thing about? What's the story? And Barbie tackles a lot of really hot button issues that the culture is talking about nonstop. But I think it does it in an incredibly sloppy way. Like, I found it inconsistent and difficult, and like it didn't know what it wanted to complain about.
Yeah, it's a little confused.
And then finally, I think the third component is dialogue, which is where you get most of your character information. The majority of your character information comes from what they say. And I thought that the dialogue was not always especially bad, but I thought like the humor generally, much like you, I was like, I don't think I cracked a smile the whole time. Not for Ken, not for nobody. That was just me.
Yeah, it was not my kind of humor.
It felt like I noticed that the jokes that they loved the most were when somebody's like being like really happy go lucky, and then they say something kind of like spooky.
Do you guys ever think about dying?
Irrepressible box of death Barbie.
Crippling shame Barbie.
Okay.
Yeah, they love that. They like that joke for some reason.
Yeah.
Or they did that commercial about like all the kind of darker Barbies.
She spent 7 hours today on Instagram looking at her estranged best friend's engagement photos while eating a family-sized bag of Starburst.
And you could tell that like that was one of the major things they wanted to do when they made this movie. So much so I was curious. I was like, I wonder why they didn't make that a through line where they would do maybe towards the beginning of the movie, they could have shown like a more traditional commercial. And then it could have been progressively more ridiculous, and it could have been much funnier. Or maybe the commercials could have followed like kind of the arc that Barbie was going on. Something like that could have been a little bit more interesting. But I'll join everybody in saying the set design was remarkably good. They got that down. In fact, I think that sold the movie. And I think that that's like generally why people enjoy the movie.
Those stills from that movie are going to be iconic, Yeah.
Yep. And Margot, of course, looks like Barbie. It's like, you couldn't get anybody better, probably. In the opening minutes, I couldn't help but notice they took 2 shots at the idea of being a mom. They were like, since the beginning of time, little girls had dolls, but they were generally baby dolls. And being a mom is fun for a little while, but not forever. Just ask your mom. That's like one of the opening jokes.
The girls who played with them could only ever play at being mothers, which can be fun, at least for a while anyway. Ask your mother.
And then not long after that, they were like, I'm pregnant, Barbie. There's only one of me because it's weird to be to have a pregnant doll.
Midge was Barbie's pregnant friend. Hey, Midge. Well, let's not show Midge, actually. She was discontinued by Mattel because a pregnant doll is just too weird.
I get it. It's a joke, but it's like, well, why is it weird to have a pregnant doll? If it's not weird there's lots of dolls in that, as the movie goes on, there's a lot more about like being a mom is hard. But yeah, I thought that it obviously had a really good creative vision. I think that honestly, I think the director is really good. Greta, I think obviously is a good director. I think like generally this, it was unbelievably artful. It was shot nicely. It didn't look like that candy Vaseline bullshit that you see in Disney Plus. It felt like they had a difficult starting place because the question is Barbie the franchise, which Mattel is making this thing, right? So they can only be so critical of themselves. Is Barbie the franchise a sexist franchise or is it a feminist franchise? Which one is it? Historically, there's a lot of feminists being like Barbie, contributed to unrealistic beauty standards and being thin and having big boobs and being subservient. On the other hand, for several decades now, she's been a doctor. She's been a Nobel Peace Prize winner. She's been every race. She's been every size. She's been every political office. And so the movie has to be like, okay, in Barbie land, it's a feminist utopia. And then it's like, all right, well, so where do we go from here? And the answer is like, well, we bring her out into the real world, which is not a feminist utopia. But then they went too far because they were like, but in Barbie land, the feminist utopia, we subjugate men and we make them feel like shit about themselves. And then when Ken and her go to the real world and Ken sees that the world is run by men, which like he also kind of realizes it's not. Because he has like a Beavis and Butthead moment. You remember in their new movie, they're like, oh, we have white privilege. And they just like walk around.
Step aside, please. We have white privilege.
Ken tries to do that with patriarchy. But then like, he's like, oh, I need to have like all these credentials and stuff. So like, it doesn't even really work out.
I think they were trying to just lampshade everything, but it undermines whatever they were trying to say, but maybe they weren't really trying to say anything.
Well, I won't let you do just one appendectomy.
But I'm a man.
But not a doctor.
Please?
No.
Can I talk to a doctor?
You are talking to a doctor.
Can you get me a coffee?
No.
And I need a clicky pen?
No.
And a white coat?
No.
And a sharp thing?
No.
There he is.
Here's the deal. The filmmakers are actually kind of smart. They actually know that they can't really in good conscience be like, the world is black and white. And and issues are this simple and sexual politics are this simple, but it still had a perspective, and that perspective is generally kind of like pop feminism, which is going to sell to the millennial women that they're selling this movie to. So ultimately what the movie has to do is it has to make Barbie / the lady who plays with her complain not just about traditional sexism, but also about the high expectations of feminism itself. Otherwise, the world that the movie takes place in would be the one that is pre-Barbie feminism. Mm-hmm. So the movie wants to complain about something, and it struggles to figure out like what avenue it's going to complain from. So much so that it gets to the end of the movie, and the male Mattel executives are like, "What do you want exactly, lady?" In other words, what kind of doll should we make if we're if we're saying that you can be the president and that stresses you out, but we also don't want to have a Barbie that's in the kitchen because that stresses you out. And I was like, this is actually like a key moment in the movie. I didn't hear anybody talk about this when it first came out. America Ferrera goes, how about you just make a doll that like doesn't have too high expectations for me and just kind of makes me feel good at the end of the day. I was like, oh, is that what this movie is? Is this movie just kind of like, I ultimately can't really take a stance per se.
What about ordinary Barbie? She just has a flattering top and she wants to get through the day feeling kind of good about herself.
Will Ferrell goes, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard or something. And some executive behind him is like, no, actually that'll sell. And he's like, oh, good.
Obviously it's not for me. And obviously they were smarter than all of us because it made more than Mario. It made more money than anything.
People love this Ken. I don't know. I'm like, isn't that the easiest thing to do in the world? Like just kind of be like a pompous asshole.
There's people who argue it could only be Ryan Gosling. I agree. It could be anybody, but I also think Ryan Gosling is a dreamy man. So I wanted to see him.
Well, fair enough. It could only be Ryan Gosling was because of because of this meme. I'm like, I think the movie probably would have survived without the reference to the meme, though. The literally me meme. I really liked Barbie and Ken from Toy Story 3.
Folks, if you want to step right this way.
I would have preferred that movie personally. The Michael Keaton one. I thought they were great.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was interesting that they ultimately the screenplay, which becomes so confused and tied in knots, you can't make sense of it. I thought it was funny. They made both sexes very manipulatable. Like, yeah, like it's super easy to manipulate an entire sex of people into serving some horrible role that's terrible for them.
You're a doctor!
I like being a helpful decoration.
And Alan likes to help me give all the Kens foot massages.
Yeah, actually, there's a piece of dialogue, and I believe it's in the speech, the big famous speech, where she's talking about how hard it is to be a lady.
It's too hard. It's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault.
She goes, we're sick of tying ourselves in knots. I'm like, well, this movie ties itself in a knot.
Do you think America Ferrera deserves that Oscar nomination?
Fuck no. I mean, I didn't think she was bad or anything, but that's not an Oscar performance.
Yeah, it's a side character. It's a side character in, like, I don't know, any show. Any show.
Yeah.
It would be the stock performance that you would give.
No one told me that John Cena plays a mermaid, a male mermaid in this. A merman. That was a nice moment.
A lot of things happen. Like, there's a lot of, like, just stuff, like, you know, Michael Cera's character and stuff.
I'm Ken's buddy. Yeah, all his clothes fit me.
Get in the car.
Very SNL. Let's be real.
Yeah.
It's just so.
Well, the whole thing is SNL to me. It's Kate McKinnon or whatever her name is.
Yeah, she doesn't really do jokes, does she? She just does that voice of hers. She just does that kind of that little funny voice.
She's just weird, and she does that voice.
I'm not warm, Jimmy, but I'll do my best.
Warm, here we go.
I certainly wouldn't watch it again. I don't know that it. Do you think it has staying power? Do you think like people will like rewatch it time and again? I think they could. It definitely has that potential.
I think with certain people, sure. I mean, I have people, coworkers that talk about how hilarious it is and how funny these jokes were. And
to this day, though, or like, did it wear off?
Yeah, it was just recently. I was talking to somebody and I just had to smile and nod because I can't say anything. You have these two movies, The Marvels and Barbie, that you watched one after another.
Yeah,
and it's like, why does one succeed and one fail? I think it's obvious. It's one is obviously marketed for women, written by women, and it's safe for women. The other one is kind of like a male property that they're retrofitting to be for women, but women are uninterested in it because they're not the target audience. And the males, and mostly males, watch the Marvel in theaters, according to the data.
Same with Madam Web, I think. Madam Web is still only like 46% women of the three people that went.
The Marvels, I don't think the Marvels was like woke or anything.
No, not at all.
It was just maybe it was, and they cut it out, but no, it was kind of just there.
It was definitely not woke at all. Ultimately, they were like, maybe we can cut some losses, make it funny, make it light. Whereas, Barbie is like hyper woke, except that its topics get so confused that it somehow makes it all the way back around.
Yeah, because I saw right-wing pundits being like, no, you misunderstand. It's actually secretly based because of this and this and this. And I'm like, I don't think we saw the same movie, guy.
I think what happened instead was, again, the filmmakers have a political perspective and a political persuasion, as does the majority of the audience. So that's I think uncontroversial. But the filmmakers are smart enough that they didn't want to be totally hacky and two-dimensional and not acknowledge certain kinds of nuance and truth. You used the term earlier, lampshade. For those who don't know it, that means like when you express something that's in a self-aware way in the middle of like a fictional narrative, just to kind of tell the audience, like, don't take us too seriously. We know that this part's imperfect as well. An example is like, there's a moment where Margot Robbie's crying and she's like, I'm ugly now. I'm not pretty anymore. It's meant to be a very serious moment. And suddenly there's voiceover narration that's like, the filmmakers would like to know that Margot Robbie was the wrong person to cast if we wanted to make this point.
I'm not stereotypical Barbie pretty.
Note to the filmmakers, Margot Robbie is the wrong person to cast if you want to make this point.
And I feel like that is representative of the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like, there's a bunch of things we wanted to say, but we couldn't quite say them correctly. So we just sort of like papered jokes over them if you wanted it to be a really good script. And obviously it doesn't need to be. It made $1 billion and who gives a fuck? But
I can tell you what to do.
That's the lesson to take away. But I think probably the script needed like this felt like the vomit draft. And it feels like, okay, let's go back to the first page and like try to build what we're building in a more coherent way. Do you remember like an FBI part where the FBI calls an intern and the intern goes to Mattel and there's like a little like kind of sketch with the FBI agent, but they like that goes nowhere. Like that's just kind of it after that. It's just supposed to be rando and funny. There's kind of a lot like Kate McKinnon's character like says that she wants to see Ken's dick. I'm also like, don't little girls watch this movie? And I want to see his dick.
Well, it's PG-13, so.
That Ken of yours, he is one nice-looking little protein pot.
I guess.
I'd like to see what kind of nude blob he's packing under those jeans.
I know it's PG-13, but it's like hyper feminine. I mean, it is a little girl's property. It is literally the very dolls and play sets that little girls play with are what sell this movie. And you're
it's like if they had a G.I. Joe film and one of the characters like, I want to see Cobra Commander's dick or something.
I want to see Cobra Commander's pussy. Oh yeah, the Kens were building a Trump wall.
As soon as they figure out how to build that wall sideways and not just up, no one is going to be able to get in or out.
The closest thing to kind of like an Orange Man Bad kind of joke.
Oh, there's an arcade one up in the Costa House or whatever. Yeah, there's a Mortal Kombat one, so I thought you'd be laser focused on that.
There was I didn't notice. There was like a mansplaining montage, you know? The women needed to manipulate the men so that they could take over Barbie Land again. And some of the examples were like, tell him you've never seen The Godfather and ask him all about The Godfather. And another one was like, I don't know how to use Photoshop. Like, show me how to use Photoshop.
Especially because like it's just a one-off joke in this Ken world. Like they wouldn't know anything about The Godfather. I don't understand this.
Well, right. That's the kind of thing I'm saying. I'm like, and also, are you meaning to imply that secretly, of course, you know all about The Godfather? He's an asshole for thinking you don't. Is that like an element to it too? Or is it that you're just uninterested in The Godfather?
I think it's confused. I don't think they know.
There's just a lot of stuff like that. It kind of like we're like that's what it is. Like the premises of the jokes aren't kind of like fully coherent.
They're like mildly sexist toward men in a way.
Yes,
but like,
and that's kind of like the extent of it. Like. It's mildly sexist towards men. Teehee?
Teehee? Maybe? I don't know.
Fucking teehee your way to $1 billion. They did.
Yeah. I'd like, yeah.
But yeah, it is ironic that at the end of the day, like the social experiment has been conducted. Women will pay a lot of money to go see really feminine girl brand stuff. And probably not superheroes generally.
I don't know. Well, yeah, but I don't think there's anything as big as Barbie. So you'd have to. No,
like you can't do this with Polly Pocket. You know, My Little Pony is still pretty big for little kids, but you can't turn it into like a PG-13 version that adults will, the grandmas will come out to and stuff. I mean, Barbie's got 70 years of.
You get some bronies, right? You get some bronies to see that.
I'm sure we can think of something together. Come on.
Not now, I'm too drunk.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.